I heard a saying a couple of weeks back around basics being the new excellent. And I really like that because if we just get the basics right, then we can deliver so much more impact than what we're doing today.
On this episode of Executive Edge, Greg is joined by Jacob Gorm Larsen, a globally recognized thought leader in digital procurement and founder of Moneyball CPH.
Where auctions is focusing on competition, sourcing optimization is also sometimes referred to as collaborative sourcing. You would use it on any sourcing event which has a complex allocation problem.
Jacob discusses e-auctions and its evolution from free markets to today's technology-driven sourcing and what makes an auction successful.
For most corporates, listen, instead of you going out and buying a new shiny object, why don't you put your energy in making sure you maximize the value coming out of one or more solutions that you already acquired?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tenzing's Executive Edge podcast. Our guest today, all the way from Denmark, is Jacob Gorm Larsen. Jacob is a globally recognized thought leader in digital procurement, known for pioneering innovative sourcing strategies and technologies. He is the founder of Moneyball CPH, a boutique consultancy specializing in advanced sourcing solutions, e-auctions, and autonomous sourcing processes. Prior to this, Jacob spent 18 years at Maersk, where he served as the head of digital procurement, leading a globally acclaimed program that executed more than 10,000 e-auctions across various industries. Jacob is the author of A Practical Guide to E-Auctions for Procurement. I highly recommend this book. And that book is widely regarded as a foundational text in the field of e-auctions. His work has earned multiple industry awards, and he's frequently featured in leading publications such as Fortune, Forbes, and the Wall Street Journal. Jacob, welcome. It's great to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Greg. I'm very pleased to be here.
No, it's going to be a great discussion about auctions, and it's going to touch on my legacy goes way back to free markets, and I know that was sort of the foundation we built there is what you built your success upon subsequently, and it's so it's sort of great to talk to a person from the next generation of what we started at free markets. And so let's dive right into it. Let's go into your career. And when was the first time you heard about auctions? These are e-auctions, folks, online auctions for goods and services, business to business. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So primarily, so Jacob, when was the first time you heard about corporations using auctions?
So that was probably back around 2005 or six, somewhere around that. I've been with Maersk for a couple of years, and there was this tradition that the CPO every year would go to the US for a week to meet up with companies, tech providers, etc., to get inspiration on what is moving. And he will always come back with a long laundry list of look into this, could you explore this, etc. And that year when he came back, reverse auctions was one of the things on the list. And I still remember sort of hearing about it and then going back and doing a bit of research and then trying to understand exactly what is this about.
Yeah. So you did your homework, and then when was the first time you started using them? Like, what was that like?
Thinking back, it was 2008, 2009, where I was taking over back then that was a new initiative, e-sourcing, e-auctions. We did a few pilots, and then where it really took off was during the financial crisis, where we as a shipping company were desperate for cost savings. There were literally no sacred cows in our cost out program. And you could say that cleared the way for taking this, which for us at the time was a new concept. And then we could address it or apply it more or less across any category. So it was actually a fantastic experience for us because we built up a good momentum, a lot of learnings. And we also took out a lot of cost with auctions in those years.
Yeah. And you started, I think, on Procurement, right? Was the technology? So.
Yeah, so we were on Procure back then, and then they were acquired by Ariba. And as it goes with those, when one solution is acquired, that's usually a dead end to stay on that for too long. So we quite quickly moved over. And then we were using Ariba for a number of years as our auction platform.
Yeah, and I should note to our audience, those who don't have the history of this technology space, but Free Markets was founded in 1995, went public during the dot-com boom of 1999, and then was acquired by Ariba. I think it was 2004. So the two companies came together. Ariba had a more of a focus on procure to pay side of things. Free Markets was more focused upstream on the sourcing side of things. It was a good marriage when they came together because it was very complementary. Jacob's picking up around the time post merger here of those two companies, and really got it going. So it sounds like it was a pretty important tool for Maersk to use to really take some cost out in a very difficult time during the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. Then, auctions sort of were falling out of favor. I saw it, unfortunately, my observation was once there was self-service technology and clients were doing it themselves, the auction game got a little less controlled because we were very careful about what we took to market and put up for auction. Not everything's right for an e-auction. And I think that spreading that out, giving these tools to everyone without a lot of, guidance potentially can lead to bad things. And I think they kind of faded out a little bit, but you kept going strong. And I think you moved from there to optimization very quickly as well, right?
No, absolutely. So we went, you could say, before the financial crisis, we were doing a few pilots, so 5-10 auctions a year or something like that. And in 2010, we did more than 1,000 auctions. And all of them were done by a small centralized team. So that would be my team, partly in Copenhagen, partly in India. But we were in control exactly for the reasons that you call out. There's both difficulties in using it, but there's also a lot of know-how. So if you let it loose, it can indeed lead to bad things. And that's kind of the bad reputation that auctions are still struggling with today, that there's a lot of bad practices and misperceptions about it. But you could say we went to plus 1,000, and then exactly as you said, we said it's great for a lot of things, but there are also areas where we can get more value out of a different approach. And that's where we then started to look at sourcing optimization, or CombinedNet, which was one of the few but leading providers back then as well.
And I should also note, being a proud Pittsburgher, that not only was Free Markets founded and based in Pittsburgh, but CombinedNet that you just mentioned, which was a company really built around, here's a heavy science term for you, combinatorial optimization, was also started here in Pittsburgh, eventually became acquired, is now part of Jagger, the solution set there. But they had a great technology for these very complex auctions, sourcing events. And can you explain where you used that combinatorial optimization? What kind of categories? I assume you're still using it on those today.
That's a lot of what we do, or the majority of what we do today is those type of complex events. And I think it's a great supplement to auctions as well. So where auctions is focusing on competition, maximizing competition by allowing bidders to bid against each other. Sourcing optimization is also sometimes referred to as collaborative sourcing, because it has more dimensions to it. So you would use it on any sourcing event which has a complex allocation problem. So where you need to split award across multiple suppliers, but also where you can split it in many different ways. So logistics is a classic example, or packaging for that matter. You always go with more than one provider, in most cases, if your network is big enough. And there are many different ways of splitting the business. So What you do is you also open up for suppliers and say, hey, how would you like to slice and dice this deal so it fits your network? So you allow suppliers to create packages or bundles, if you like, which they can then submit. The problem for procurement is then you get many different packages, which also overlaps, and that it kind of becomes apples and pears that you begin to compare. And that's why you need the combinatorial optimization algorithm that will help you sort out, how do I do it overall? How should I distribute or allocate this in the smartest possible way? So instead of spending, weeks in Excel trying to figure it out, you ask the optimization engine to give you the different scenarios, and it's done in a couple of minutes.
And you can specify, say, give me a lowest cost scenario, right?
Yeah.
Give me the best 2-vendor scenario or 3-vendor scenario, right? You can set the parameters and build those out.
The starting point is always, cherry picking or the lowest possible cost. And then you add constraints on it. Typically, the next scenario you would do is an incumbent scenario. What if we allocate exactly as it is today so we don't do any change to our supplier setup? What would the cost then be? And then the number of suppliers is another classic one where I very often hear it from clients saying, yeah, and we want a setup where we have 4 suppliers or we want 7 suppliers. And I ask, how do you end up at that number? And it turns out it's often a very random or practical consideration that we don't want to deal with the hassle of onboarding more than 4. Well, what if you're willing to go to 5, you can save another $1 million. Is it worth the hassle then? And then, yeah, absolutely. And that's really the case about optimization, is that it enables you to take more data-driven decisions. So by having all the answers to those questions, again, it's not something that will take days or weeks in Excel. It's something that the optimization solution will tell you in a couple of minutes, because you just change the parameters, push the button, and then it will tell you what is the extra saving of going from 4 to 5 suppliers, as an example.
Very cool. If we can roll back a little bit, I want to talk about how you set up your team and your operations. Because, when I was at Free Markets, one of the big selling points that I would make to clients when they would tour through, I used to run the Global Market Operations Center there before I moved into a more commercial role. But we would often have people come in and watch that room. It was a pretty cool setup for the time. It was very techy, and we had a sort of a fishbowl that we operated in, and people could look in and watch what's going on, but it was very confidential. There was nothing on screen about clients or suppliers. We were very careful how we managed this, but we could set something like that up because we had scale, right? I would tell clients, you may run a few auctions a month, and, for you, it's going to be a back office function. Your back office is our front office. We're doing this across multiple clients. We're in these categories every day, day in, day out. So we would, that was a big selling point to use us as a service versus, trying to do it themselves. And so I'm interested to know, obviously, when you're running 1,000 auctions at Maersk, you've got that kind of scale. So how did you set up your team, and how did you organize it to sort of maintain some of the quality that we talked about earlier, to make sure that a bad category where only 2 people in the whole world can produce it, is getting auctioned or something, right? Tell me how your team was set up.
So actually the Free Markets headquarter was kind of an inspiration. Of course, we didn't have the funds to build a room like what you guys
well, we had money we spent in all sorts of ways there.
But one of the things I took away from it is that implementing something like auctions is a lot about selling. You have to convince your stakeholders. You have to make them excited about it. So if I talk first about that, and then I'll talk about the team setup afterwards.
Sure. Yeah.
We did do, every time we had a high profile auction, we would book a couple of meeting rooms next to each other. So one meeting room, we would have the auction administrator. We would put up a couple of extra phones, try to sort of mimic the setup that you guys had. So we had a direct line to the auction administrator at the provider's side. And then in the other meeting room, we would display the auction at a big screen and invite all the stakeholders in and do like a popcorn event of it. But also, I wouldn't say trying to over-engineer it, but there's definitely a change management or selling component to this as well. And similar, actually, in our offshore setup, it took a number of attempts, but finally we got approval for putting up a big screen next to the auction team, so that every time we did a big auction, which was monitored out of our team in Mumbai, we could display it on the screen so that people could come and watch it and then sort of buy in and understand the concept better. And in terms of the team, we in the first couple of years we had a small core team in Copenhagen, because most of the stakeholders, the owners of the categories, would be in Copenhagen. So we were engaging with them out of Copenhagen, doing the convincing, etc. And then once they were sort of won over, we had a team in Mumbai who would do the majority of the execution. And again, we actually spent a lot of time standardizing the processes. So taking, again, inspiration from the free market operating model with standardized way of setting it up, standardized procedure for checking that it's correctly set up, standardized approach to how we train and onboard suppliers, etc. It was both for efficiency, but also, again, to minimize mistakes happening in the setup. An auction, it has to run flawless, or else then you kill competition. So we were, again, heavily inspired on the way you guys did it as a business. We were just an internal center of excellence doing it. And by the way, I could add, it's both some of the same people I work with today, but our processes are exactly the same. They're heavily inspired by what you guys originally did at Free Market and what we then further developed at Maersk in the team.
Yeah, that's what I think I was most impressed and surprised by when I first got to Free Markets. I was in the 300s. I came in about a month before we went public, and in 99, I left, as a plant manager for GE Lighting at the time. And I think my wife thought I was crazy. The year we went public, I just saw the stats because we just have a 30-year reunion here. First 9 months revenue that year were around 13 million. So even if we were growing at a pretty good clip, say 20 million that first year, and we came out of going public at a $9 billion valuation. I didn't make a mistake there, folks. $9 billion on about 20 million a year in revenue. So it was the heavy days of the dot-com era when everybody thought maybe the economy's changing and companies can be valued this way. It was tremendous fun, but there were a lot of companies that were really just propped up at that time. But I can tell you, I got inside there, and I was coming out of a operations background, in heavy industry, and I was super impressed with the procedures, the way that things were set up. It was a very collegial atmosphere where you helped each other and learned from each other. And if you came up with a best practice, that got implemented pretty quickly. We had a lot of smart people around game theory, which I do want to touch on some more with you because I know we're both game theory junkies. But, it really takes, people don't understand, it seems easy, right? It's not eBay. You don't put an item out there with a couple pictures and set a bidding price, start price and go. There's a lot to prepare the bidders. There's a lot to prepare the technology at the time. We had to pretty much, configure each and every auction in a very complex on the back end way, right? That was fat client, and it was way before SaaS, and so there was a lot that went into it. But everywhere you went, you could feel the process and the rigor that was present. And I think that's really what it takes. And I think people underestimate that part of it. And that's, again, one of the reasons maybe why when you just gave people the technology, they didn't think through all the process. Didn't think of it as a system. They thought of it as, I have technology now. I can put my RFP there and I can take it to auction, and they forget about 20 things that we would have never missed, right? So, that's what it really takes, and it's really cool that you were able to build that operation out.
But it's real time back and forth, and if you make a mistake, the impact is so much bigger because it's real time. So you can't have those mistakes if you want to do it at scale and make something like an auction program a strategic differentiator for your procurement function.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't stress enough the trust you need to build, not just with the people who's own that spend and are putting it up, right? It's really with the suppliers, even more so, that they will come in and feel that this is a fair market, that they're not being misled by any shill bidding or anything. And we had very strict rules around that, and very strict protocols for enforcing the fairness of the market. Our market operations team was very neutral, right? We were obviously serving clients, but our job was to make sure it was fair, the suppliers were treated right, because in any two-sided market, if it's asymmetric and it feels unfair, it's very difficult to make that successful. And did you have any challenges with that on the supply side?
We still have that, and it's been the same for the last 15 years, right? That you have to, exactly as you call out, you have to build that credibility around the process, around the platform. And that's also why it's super important that when you do it without, I had a saying back then whenever we got a new colleague, I said, you need to do 200, 300, 400 auctions before you can look in the eye of that category director without blinking and telling him he'll get a better deal from this. But of course, also when you talk to the suppliers, you need to be able to, in a credible way, tell them why this is actually more fair than the old school process where you negotiate a bit and then you discuss in the corridor and then you call and award the business to maybe the best, maybe not the best, because you have a personal preference. When you have a market that works, it's super transparent. Auctions is the only negotiation method where you empower suppliers to take control. So if this deal is really important for them, then they have their own destiny in control. They can just lower their bid, so they're number one, and so they win it. If you have credibility around the process and the platform, of course. So it's essential for successful auctions that you have that, and that's why, again, that you did have clients, but you're also the facilitator of the market. And that's why you had to own that credibility on behalf of both sides in the market, I think.
Absolutely. And you pointed out, if you're in first place, right? A lot of suppliers thought, well, if I'm the low bidder, I win, right? And that's how it works in eBay. That's how it works in upward auctions. Obviously, the highest bidder wins there. But in these, it was just, well, we had to tell people being the lowest bidder is great because you are the best price. But the client ultimately has other decision criteria, right? There is a switching cost to move away from their incumbent. If there's a present supplier today, they have to bear that in mind. So, we can't always guarantee that if you're in first place, you're going to win it. Now, some auctions were like that. Let's say it was a commodity, right? Something that was very open market and it really had no differentiation beyond price. But it was very often the case that, it was just, this is to get the best bid. You'll have an idea of where you stand in the market. And we started to see companies in the PC market, right? We were running PC markets a couple a week for all of our clients. And we found one, I won't say the name of the company, but it's well known. I'm using one of their machines right now. They had a strategy to not be first because they didn't want to drive the market down. They just wanted to be a close second. So they sort of stayed a certain distance off first place and felt that, their machine and their service and whatever the non-price factors were going to differentiate them enough that their bid would be considered very close to the winning bid as well when you took it at total cost of ownership and total value for the money.
And now I'm not 100% sure whether it's a free market patent or whether it was a patent that Ariba took after the acquisition. But this concept around transformational bidding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Where you incorporate non-price parameters into an auction so that whoever is shown as you're the lead bidder, it's not necessarily because you have the lowest price.
Correct.
It's because it's price plus value. And that concept we still use and promote heavily today because it is really as unless it is a pure commodity, then really it's not only about price, but there are other parameters as well. But the the dialogue with the stakeholders will then say, okay, just tell me, how much is it worth that this supplier is super flexible? I recognize that when you call him Friday afternoon, he picks up and he helps you. That is worth something.
Right.
But just tell me, is it worth 100,000 or is it worth 1 million? And as long as you can put, a value to that, then we can incorporate it. And then he would come out on top, not because he has the lowest price, but because of price plus value. So that kind of bonus malus, I think, is again, even to this day, an underused feature of most auction solutions.
Yeah, I agree. We did come up with transformational bidding at free markets, and it was pretty cool. And it went beyond often just saying, okay, because we know this is a high service, we're going to take everybody else's bid and maybe bump it up by 5% because we just feel this company's 5% better because of that service. What we would often do is have the bidders bid on multiple parameters, right? And then that would result in not a price so much, but a bid, right? It would somehow be economically valued, but it was converting. So for instance, if I was providing something and I could do a 2-week lead time versus another bidder that had a 4-week lead time, and we had the same price on the end item, my bid's more attractive, right? You don't have to carry as much inventory, right? You don't have to tie up working capital to as much working capital to work with me, right? So taking those factors into account is what I would say with transformational bidding. That became sort of next level, right? Yeah. And that was what was pretty cool back in the day. I know we came up with a lot of innovations to really, after you observe these markets for a while, you're seeing, okay, rank bidding is very frustrating to the bidder because they can't find the next position. They're looking and they're kind of blind. So we came up with Next Horse, where they could see the lowest bid in front of them, the next place in front of them. So if you were in 4th place, you could take 3rd place, and then you would be able to see where 2nd place was.
Yeah.
So it relieves some frustration for the bidders. And quite honestly, it relieves some technical overhead for us as well, because, those bidders would just keep bang and bang and bang and bang and trying to find it, taking the smallest step they can toward that bid. So there were some pretty cool innovations that happened along the way to add a lot of nuance, I would say, to the bidding process, and it further legitimized the channel as a way to really negotiate effectively and create competitive market out there.
But it's to this day, it's one of the questions I get the most, or one of the challenges I get the most, is that we say, hey, but Jacob, this is not just about price, and this supplier is important. There's no way I can put a value to it.
Right.
And my response is always, but if you can't put a value to it, how can you ever select a supplier? You end up doing it, but you do it through gut feel rather than a data-driven process. And I always think back on a leadership meeting that we had at, so Maersk used to be a conglomerate. So I think it was a couple of times per year, all the CPOs from the different companies would meet. I would typically do a status, sing and dance, and then the group CPO could tell everybody that they needed to do more auctions. But we were having a discussion in that, and I think it was either the CPO from the oil division or the drilling division saying exactly this point, but it's hard and we can't really assign a value to this, and it's our suppliers are special. And the retail guy, so we also had a retail division, he just smiled, and then he said, if a supplier is able to specify something to me on an invoice, I can specify it back to him in an auction. I don't care. Let's just do it. Because the retail were just traditionally more aggressive on cost and use of auctions.
Yeah, that brings up another point. So you reminded me, I always thought of Maersk as a big shipping conglomerate, right? And it's a big shipping company, still is. But it was also had other businesses, retail, oil, you just mentioned. Yeah. And so across those business units, if you will, what were some of the most interesting categories you were taking out to market back then?
But there's so many to choose from. But I think one of the more sort of exotic categories that we did for a couple of years was actually for the shipping division, and it was armed guards. Back in the time where there was a lot of pirates around the Horn of Africa, every container line would hire armed guards, typically special forces, and then they would go on board and be on board the vessel until it was past the point of the pirates, and if needed, help defend the vessel against the pirates as well. And of course, it's a super special case to source and negotiate. But again, when you break it down, it comes down to a day rate. So for how many days will these guys be on board? And of course, it's higher than a normal consultant, but in principle, it's a day rate. So, right. And there were many companies offering the service. So we did auctions for this category as well, of course.
And did you have to specify like the weapons that they would have in their arsenal, or was there anything special about that besides the day rate?
It wasn't so much on the weapons side of it, but of course there was a lot of security clearance, a lot of insurance certificates, etc. That these, so this quickly becomes a shady market, but there are legit providers of it, and of course, again, it's not eBay, so we don't end up with somebody completely random. There's a thorough vetting process, so it's only professional, legit players that are invited, and therefore we can only end up with one of them as our supplier in this space.
Right. Yeah, it's coming back to it again, right? Everybody thinks of the auction. The auction is really you're compressing the negotiation part of a very, sometimes very elaborate sourcing process, right? A lot of preparation goes into it. You've sort of narrowed down the field that these are the qualified bidders. Now, the last thing we want them to do is go online, and we're going to provide a certain amount of visibility into the market based on the parameters that we've got, the situation that we've got, and we're going to allow them to negotiate and that's where the name comes from, obviously, in a free market, right? You have visibility into where the market is and what your level of competitiveness is. And but the work, this bid you said highlights a lot of the work, the vetting and stuff that goes on behind the scenes to even make it to the party, if you will, for the bidders, right? They have to be qualified, and people are like, you're just throwing people in there. Like, no, we're not. Every bidder, we may have recommended some bidders to the client, but every bidder has been qualified to a certain degree by the client here, and they've been vetted to be in this market. They deserve to be here as much as you do, right? Is what we had to tell a lot of bidders. So again, it's that trust factor. So that's cool. And then you also did a lot of road freight. I remember when we talked, you said you did a lot of road freight at Maersk. And again, that sort of seems counterintuitive for a shipping company, but a big part of shippers is road freight, right?
Yeah. So we did over the years, I don't know, auctions on road freight in probably plus 50 countries. Back in the days, in the beginning, right, you would have some of the suppliers, literally going into the closest town to find an internet cafe so they would have access. And then they would participate in the auction from the internet cafe. We don't have that concept anymore, but back in the days, that was how it was. And we literally did thousands of them because we would always need more than one supplier. We would need a whole portfolio to cope with the volume and also to have alternatives. And that's really one of the great things that auction will give you as well, which is bid compression. So of course you get a better price from the lead bidder, but you also get a lot. You get compressed pricing from number 2 to number 5 or number 10, if you like, because everybody gets the feedback and you're negotiating with 30, 40, it could be 50 suppliers at a time sometimes. And without having meetings, everybody is coming closer to the true market value point. So I think for a category like road freight, and still to this day, auctions is just an ideal one because it is very market driven and you need that compression element as well, which takes forever if you want to do meetings with 5, 10, 15 suppliers in parallel.
Right on. So let's move from Maersk. You left Maersk, and I want to know what inspired you. What was your inspiration to write this book, A Practical Guide to E-Auctions for Procurement? I know you can find it on Amazon. You can probably find it in a lot of places, but that's the name, A Practical Guide to E-Auctions for Procurement. Very practical name for a practical book. But what inspired you to write this book? And what was that like?
It was really down to, I'd worked with auctions for plus 10 years at the time. And I wouldn't say I was getting tired of it because it always sparks a fire in me, but I was getting tired or frustrated with having the same discussions with stakeholders and the same clarifying, the same misperceptions, etc. So at one point I looked and there were either very academic articles on auctions, which was super math driven, or some very, I would say, light touch consultancy white papers. There wasn't any learning books on how do you actually do this if you're new to it. So it was an inspiration both to, or you could say the ambition was to write the book I would have liked to have had when I started the journey, but also a little bit, you could call it self-therapy sometimes, to once and for all settle the score and explain what is facts, what is myths, and how do you do this? What's the process from you know there's value in this, you want to do it, but then what are the steps you need to go through in order to successfully execute an auction?
Yes. I guess you could send that to your clients as a pre-read. Yeah, read this before the meeting.
Well, if only they did, they wouldn't need so much assistance, because a lot of it is, again, the principles that you guys developed at Free Market. We might have added a small twist here, there, but the thinking around it is the same. But of course, if you've never tried it, it's good to have a steady hand at the wheel. As I said, somebody who have tried it thousands of times when you get the tough questions from stakeholders or suppliers, etc. So, but we do actively, of course, use it when we train people when I do auction workshops. The book is typically part of it, as well as a handout to the attendees.
It just makes a lot of sense. After you've done it at scale, you've seen something 20 times that they're seeing for the first time. And I always tell folks, like, look, these guides are so great because when you're not doing this day in, day out, you just don't have the ability to learn at this kind of pace and be able to take away these things and write a book like this. So I encourage anybody that's interested in applying auctions to read Jacob's book. It's very practical. I'm just going to say it. So it's a great book, and congrats on getting that published and everything that goes with that. But then you started up this company. Let's talk about Moneyball CPH, which I think CPH is a little dedication to Copenhagen, where you're based, right?
Absolutely, and Moneyball is a dedication to the baseball concept that is well known in the U.S.
Billy Bean, yeah, Billy Bean and the Oakland A's, great movie, by the way. Recommend that movie; it's very cool,
fantastic. And Mike Lewis's book, if I should give a book recommendation as well. A fantastic book as well, introducing the concept. I got super inspired when I read the book and also watched the movie. And I went back to my colleagues at Maersk and said, we got to be able to translate this concept into procurement of making more data-driven decisions. And then we started to look for what is the area where we have a lot of data points so that we can look at statistics. And that's where we again stumbled over auctions, and then we looked at all from our 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 events that we had done up until then. At the time, we started to look at the statistics there. What's the value if we add one more supplier to an auction? So what's the difference between 3 and 4 and 5, etc. And it was approximately 1%. Up to 9. After 9, you couldn't document an incremental saving. So there's a diminishing return on increasing competition as well. We looked at the best day of the week, Tuesday, worst day was Friday. And then we looked at a number of things, also efficiencies. So in RFP processes, what's actually the efficient work time from You launch it to suppliers, access it. That's the first sort of waste period. Then they work with it, and then they submit it, and then the event closes. And for us, it was 25, 50, and 25. So 50% waste time if we add it up. And we used that, again, to educate and say, maybe you shouldn't always, by default, keep your RFPs open for 4 weeks. If they only need 2 weeks, then go with 2 weeks. So if we, again, at scale at a global company can reduce the cycle time for RFPs, then the procurement team can do more with the same people, and we can have a bigger impact.
Yeah.
So, it was that thinking of translating the baseball stuff into procurement that when I left Maersk, I said, that's the mission of this new company. It is to help procurement teams make more data-driven decisions. And then the Moneyball name was the right one, and then the reference to Copenhagen, as you called out as well, with CPH.
Yeah, and so you're working with clients today to help them. Tell us a little bit about the value proposition, and when you work with a client, what's a typical engagement like?
So a typical engagement for us would be a large company that are either new to an area like sourcing optimization or auctions. We would come in, help them get the technology off the ground. And, one thing is the practicality of configuring a solution, but what is a lot more important is the mindset. When you talk auctions, the understanding of what it is and how it works and the whole strategy part. And when you talk sourcing optimization, that they understand this analytical proposition that these platforms comes with, that e-sourcing is not just about collecting data and rates and then getting it out into Excel to do your analysis. You should do and aim to do all your analysis in the platform, because it will give you both efficiencies, but also there will be a more effective approach to market if you can keep it in there. So we work a lot with that mindset, changing that with the client, making sure they understand the real opportunities of these technologies, so it doesn't become a tactical solution, you could say. We sometimes help them with designing the program so exactly they can do the scale as well, and then we can be the backbone for extra complex cases. They can call us in, but else then as we train up their own team as well.
Right.
And then if I could ask the last thing, so where we try to differentiate as well is that none of us are very experienced consultants. We are 9 today, soon we'll be 10. Everybody comes with an industry background. And that's why, again, when we go into these companies, we know exactly the position they're in, because we've spent years in a similar role ourselves, both operating the environment of big, complex organizations, but also the complexity of their projects. We've addressed exactly those projects for years with our different corporate backgrounds.
That's great, because I think you probably have a lot of people who had a lot of experience in a corporate environment. They're not really the true cut from the consultant cloth, so to speak, which, by the way, is not a bad thing. We use many experts here at my company today, right? We bring expertise, not just traditional consulting pyramid to play. But, the fact that they've done it, they've been there, they've worked these categories, they've had these situations, they know their way around it, and you can take that in your clients. It has to be a massive lift, and I imagine there's some great knowledge transfer that occurs as well when you work with clients, so that you can teach their team how to operate as well as your team is operating.
No, and I think it's probably because we come with the background that we have, that knowledge transfer. It's just an ingrained part of our DNA. That's our model. We don't go in and lift things out and then execute it. We work with them as an extension of the team, and we deliver results, but we also deliver capabilities while, delivering the results as well.
Yeah, we like to say here, and you can steal this line because I stole it from a guy I work with, but we like to say, we do it with you. We don't do it to you, right? We work alongside our clients and really co-create, because we want to leave and make sure what we work on, what we help them with, is sustainable. right? And it's not going to fall away when we leave because we've been keeping something propped up. So that's great that you're doing that. So one thing I want to touch on, there's two more things I want to hit, but one is there are a million solutions, it seems, now out in the market, right? And I ran a software company for a while after free markets, and I remember when it was tough to raise money. And then all of a sudden, when COVID hit and supply chain all of a sudden became a bit of a darling, there was an immense amount of funding and capital that went into a lot of companies that started up. So I'm happy for all those people that were able to raise money, maybe more easily than it was when I was running a company. But, that's a timing thing. That's a market demand thing. But there are so many solutions out there now for source, not just auctions, but sourcing and optimization and orchestration. I just want to get your thoughts on the evolution of solutions and, how you feel about it. Because I feel like in some way you don't feel necessarily that the new ones aren't always better, right? Maybe it's old wine in a new bottle. I don't know. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So no, but I share your excitement around the market, and there are indeed thousands of solutions, but I think and that's great, and some of them are truly unique and offering something new. So it's not to put on them, but I think for most corporates, and when I recommend that to clients, they are maybe pushing back a little bit in the beginning, but I do hope they get the point that it's out of the best, with the best intentions, when I say, listen, instead of you going out and buying a new shiny object you already paid for free, why don't you put your energy, you don't even have to put money because you already bought them, in making sure you maximize the value coming out of those one or more solutions that you already acquired. But I also know, it's this human thing about always striving for the next thing. And I think that's sometimes hurting us, that we are not maximizing the value potential.
Right.
I heard a saying a couple of weeks back around, basics being the new excellent. And I really like that, because if we just get the basics right, then we can deliver so much more impact than what we're doing today.
Yes.
So it's not always popular advice, because most CPOs would like a new shiny object that they can show to other CPOs or their CEO. But the matter of fact, if you want the biggest return on your investment, then just get more value out of what you already have.
Right. Yeah, we call it sweating the assets, right? Leverage those assets as much as possible. And I don't know, it seems to be becoming a recurring theme on this podcast that about simplicity, right? It's very easy to complicate things. It's difficult to simplify things. But I think as humans, we just have this fundamental flaw that we can make it more complicated, and we can try to overdo it. Whereas if you strip it back to the basics, sometimes you really find that you can do a lot if you're just focusing on getting the basics right, and then looking where you can make incremental enhancements to that. But you gotta have the foundational principles need to be there, and you got to try to keep it as simple as possible. I think is a lesson we keep repeating on this podcast.
No, but it's because it's so true, but it's also so hard, right, to implement it in reality. And I can relate to the need for looking for a new shiny object. But if it's my own money, I know where I would spend them, and that would be on sweating the asset, maximizing the value.
Awesome. Jacob, I'm going to close this out. I always like to close with a moment of gratitude. And you've had a great career so far. You're still going. You've got your own business now, and congrats on achieving the 10-person headcount. That's a nice milestone for you to reach. And that tells me that you're creating value for clients. But, looking back on your career, is there anyone that you would like to acknowledge for helping you to grow as a leader, and as an author, as a business owner? And somebody who's been very influential in your career.
Absolutely. And there's so many, so I'll guaranteed forget someone as well. But if I start from sort of the beginning of it, then of course, someone like Glenn Meekham and the entire free market alumni. As I put in a LinkedIn post not that long ago, we are literally standing on all of your shoulders there. So what Glenn created, and with the rest of the team as well, of course, I think is amazing, and I owe that a lot to my career. And then you could say the next thing, I am so appreciative of the just about 18 years I got at Maersk, for the CPOs that I worked with there, who had sort of the courage to allow us to really go all in on auctions and build this beast of a cost out team and engine. And you could say the engine, that was my team and my colleagues at the time there. You can't do anything on your own. So, of course, highly appreciative for them as well. And I'm fortunate enough that I now have a chance to work with a few of them every day, as well as they've joined my team. And that also leads me then to the last bucket, which is my team at Moneyball here, where we allow ourselves to be highly specialized. You can even call us sourcing optimization nerds and auction nerds. We really love this area, and having a chance to share that with like-minded people just make it a blessing and a fantastic experience to go to work every single day. So I'm full of gratitude also for the people I work with right now, all my colleagues.
Yeah, I can tell you our conversations, as we got to know each other and led up to this. So Jacob and I, for the audience, I always knew of Jacob. I kind of watched him from afar, and and I reached out to him at some point, and we had such a great conversation about the early days, and you brought back a lot of moments for me, and I had the good fortune, as I mentioned, the Free Markets team reunited for a 30-year reunion here in Pittsburgh a couple weekends ago, and I had a chance to see some people and express gratitude to those folks, and for what's happened to me. My career was propelled by that company, and continues to be connected to that company sort of everywhere I go. And so it's nice to look back on that. But you've had I just think phenomenal success, and I think will continue to. I still am happy looking back this many years later that auctions and sourcing optimization and some of the technology, the pioneering stuff that we were doing at Free Markets has blossomed and evolved and become such a thing. To think that there is actually a massive conference called Digital Procurement World. Shout out to the team there, Matthias and his crew. I mean, they've done a great job of building out that, but that just speaks to the sort of ecosystem that got created around technology-driven solutions, and then service companies like yourself that come in and help people make the most of that technology to really drive enterprise value for customers. So it's been a fantastic conversation with you today, Jacob. And, if you have any closing comments, I'd welcome you to have them here. But it's been great talking to you today. And I think our listeners are really going to appreciate some of the things that you brought forward. Thank you.
Thanks again for having me both on the podcast, but I can only echo what you say about the conversation. I appreciate it every time. It's good anecdotes. It's good to catch up on these things. And what I think is truly impressive is that a company like Free Market, who was founded 30 years ago, to this day still has impact on people's lives and the results that are created in many companies. That's quite an achievement, I think.
Yeah. I think a lot of the executives could feel that legacy, and a lot of people have gone on to do great things with other companies and create a lot of value out in the world. So I have a lot of gratitude for that experience myself, as you can tell. So it's been great. I'm going to let you move on with your weekend because you're a lot closer to it than I am right now. But Jacob, thanks for joining us. And until next time, let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. And thanks again for having me.
All righty. You take care. Bye-bye.